The voiceover fades into a grainy memory just 2 weeks prior in Ouagadougou, an unannounced visit to a burnt-down library. No press, no speeches. Traoré stood quietly among ashes and broken shelves, handing out new books to children sitting, barefoot on scorched ground. A grandmother watched from the doorway, her eyes wet, whispering to no one in particular. This one still remembers the ground he came from. That quiet moment, caught accidentally on a teenage girl's phone, had gone viral within hours, not because he spoke, but because he didn't. Now, in Dakar, that same image, him kneeling in dust, lingers on screens across Africa, contrasted against the gold-trimmed chairs and air-conditioned performances of diplomacy playing out in real time. The contrast isn't lost on anyone, least of all the youth watching. Inside the summit hall, a Kenyan delegate shifts uncomfortably as Traoré adjusts the mic. The silence stretches, not awkward but sharp. Cameras flicker, live streams climb. 2 millions. A woman in Accra turns up the volume. A bus driver in Kampala stops mid-route to let passengers hear. A fruit vendor in Katana, her hands red with mango juice, watches from a cracked phone screen. All of them waiting, hoping. Somewhere beneath their breath, the same thought circles. Say something that matters. Traoré glances once toward the high table where foreign representatives sit in smug detachment, then back to the room. His eyes don't plead, they hold. And then softly he begins again. We inherited broken maps and borrowed tongues. We were taught to hate the soil beneath our own feet. That ends now. A minister coughs, trying to hide his discomfort. Another shifts his chair slightly away, as though the truth carries infection. But Traoré doesn't flinch. The translator stalls, unsure how to render dignity without diluting it. In the background, even the security guards lean in. Momentarily, forgetting their orders, he continues. They gave us independence, then sold us the chains. Told us who to trade with, how to pray, what to forget. But Africa is not a business deal. Africa is a soul land. We are not for sale. A slow gasp ripples, not loud but felt. In the control room, a technician lowers his coffee, whispers he's not just speaking, he's undoing. Minister Diop forces a smile, leans toward his mic again, trying to restore balance. Captain Traoré is clearly passionate, but governance requires reason, not slogans. Without breaking gaze, replies measured, unwavering. Then let reason explain why half of our minerals leave without taxes, while half our children sleep hungry. Let reason justify why the language of our courts is still colonial. Let reason tell me why your pension is paid in euros, while your people dig for water with bare hands. No one speaks. In that moment, nothing explodes. No fists raised, no marching boots, just silence, so loud it echoes. The kind that doesn't leave the room, but enters people. Buries deep, unignorable. Then, with the faintest nod, Traoré ends. Africa does not need permission to remember who she is. She needs courage, and that courage starts with truth. Before anyone can respond, the broadcast cuts to a stunned panel. Newsrooms scramble, hashtags flood timelines. Hashtag Wake Up Africa. Traoré speaks in villages. Teenagers rewatch the clip. In university halls, professors change their lecture slides. Mid-class. Within Paris, a policy advisor's hand trembles above a red phone. Something has shifted, but Traoré doesn't linger. He steps down without applause. Walks out alone. As he came, past marble walls, past the cameras, back into the heat. The hall remains still. The officials frozen. The world watching. And just as the scene begins to dissolve, a final line settles in the air, narrated in quiet retrospect. It was the first time in years Africa heard herself speak, and belief, once awakened, is difficult to contain. The story moves through shifting geographies, a protest in Bamako, a midnight mural in Lagos, a whispered prayer in Swahili beneath a broken television screen. These aren't coordinated revolts, but scattered sparks catching across a continent long soaked in silence. Meanwhile, Traoré refuses interviews with Western networks. He doesn't clarify his politics, he doesn't campaign, he simply moves village to village, often alone, sometimes with 2 or 3 silent bodyguards. In one scene, he helps unload grain sacks during a food shortage. A small boy asking, "Are you the man from the phone?" He smiles, lifts the sack, says nothing. The message is presence. Narration reveals layers of history hidden in plain sight. A contract signed in 1984 allowed a French mining company to extract uranium in Niger at 1/50th its market value. Still active. A Senegalese port, once public, quietly privatized to a multinational holding tied to a former cousin. A line in a 1992 textbook that reads, "Africa was discovered in the 15th century. These aren't oversights, they are blueprints." And the system thrives when those beneath it are too tired to question. Traoré's presence begins to stir discomfort. Not just among European diplomats, but African elites too. In a luxury restaurant in Abidjan, a former president's son scoffs over grilled prawns. He's just angry. Anger doesn't run countries. A waitress nearby hears him. Her expression doesn't change. But later, she messages her cousin in Togo. He fears what he cannot imitate. A quiet shift is happening, not in palace coups, but in kitchens, classrooms, and taxi radios. Inside a government office in Addis Ababa, a mid-level policy advisor nervously deletes a draft resolution that favored extending foreign leases. He remembers his mother's village, the one where aid trucks stopped after cameras left. Traoré's speech plays again in the background. The advisor mutters, "We've played polite too long." Minister Diop watches all this with mounting unease. Once a radical voice in Pan-African student movements, he now sits at the helm of international development partnerships that mostly recycle aid money back to donor nations. His face appears on banners in conferences he barely attends. The guilt is quiet, numbed by titles, softened by accolades. But Traoré's presence threatens the comfort of forgetting. One night, Diop opens a dusty box from his youth leaflets, jail photos, a copy of The Wretched of the Earth with scribbles in the margin. The camera lingers on a line he underlined. Decades ago, the colonized intellectual accepts the cogwheel of colonialism and becomes the transmission line between the nation and a foreign power. He shuts the box. Exhales. Traoré doesn't call anyone out by name. He doesn't have to. His walk through a diamond mine where workers are paid in rice is broadcast live. A clip of him drinking well water with locals while rejecting bottled imports trends for days. He delivers a speech at a primary school graduation, telling 12-year-olds they may say you have nothing, but you have the truth. And that, once spoken, is unstoppable. The children repeat it, again and again. A chant without drums, even in foreign capitals. The tremors are felt. A leaked email in Brussels warns, this is not conventional populism, it's cultural resurrection. And we don't have a policy for that. In Washington, a consultant asks, what if he never runs for office? What if his power is refusal? Yet not everyone is inspired. In South Africa, a mining lobby pays for ads, labeling Traoré dangerous to stability. In a backdoor meeting, Diop is offered a position on the board of an energy firm if he can help soften the narrative. He agrees, but his signature hesitates. The final moments of this section return us to the people. A midwife in Sudan paints a mural of Traoré beside Patrice Lumumba. A teenage boy in Malawi changes his WhatsApp status to, "My dignity has no export price." Across cities and villages, the quiet storm builds. Not of rebellion, but recognition. And then, a press announcement. Traoré is invited to speak again at the next Pan-African Economic Summit. This time not as an observer, but as the keynote. Headlines spin, ministers scramble, and deep in a private room, Diop stares at the invitation card in his hand, the embossed gold trembling slightly between his fingers. The wind outside howls, carrying whispers of a past that no longer wishes to stay buried. The silence doesn't break, it deepens. The room seems to shrink, the polished wood walls pressing in like witnesses. Cameras capture faces frozen in fragile composure, some blinking too fast, others staring down at notes they no longer understand. A bead of sweat rolls down Diop's temple, ignored but unforgiving. Outside the hall, in rural town squares, classrooms, and crowded minibus screens, people lean in, not just to hear but to feel. Every word lands, not like policy, but prophecy. Inside the summit, no one claps, no one dares. The weight of history hangs too thick. Traoré steps back from the podium, as if finished, but he doesn't sit. He paces, slowly, deliberately, each step echoing against the floor like a gavel. Then, unexpectedly, he turns again and speaks not to the ministers, but to the children watching in silence at home. We are the descendants of those who refused to die quietly, and now they are watching us. What will we say when they ask if we still bowed? The translator stumbles, pausing too long. Traoré waits. The message is meant to land unfiltered. He glances to the side where an EU representative clears her throat, attempting neutrality. "Captain," she offers cautiously, "these remarks could damage cooperation." Traoré doesn't blink. "Cooperation?" he repeats. "Is that what you call it?" "We call it surrender packaged as partnership." The hall stiffens. Somewhere near the back, a young delegate from Cameroon, older than 25, lets out a quiet exhale. She's the only one who nods. Traoré doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't pound fists. He simply unveils. "For 60 years, you've handed us development plans that start with debt and end with dependency. You ask for peace, but demand silence. You call our anger dangerous, while your weapons fill our skies." Diop closes his eyes briefly. There's something hollow in his posture now, as though the speech is stripping layers he spent decades constructing. He opens his mouth to respond again, but nothing comes. Traoré's eyes meet his. For a moment, the camera captures what no document can. Two men, once perhaps similar, now standing on opposite sides of truth. Diop finally whispers, barely audible to those closest, "You don't understand what we had to give up just to survive." And Traoré answers, without malice, "But I do. And I came to say we don't have to give up anymore." Screens across the continent freeze frame on that exchange. It isn't dramatic, but it is irreversible. The moderator fumbles with papers, trying to move on, but the audience isn't ready. For the first time in the summit's history, the applause comes not from the hall but from the streets. Markets erupt into cheers. Taxis honk in unison. In a school in Kigali, a teacher lets students stop class to watch the replay. In a mining town in DRC, workers pause mid-shift, wipe their hands, and stand. Inside the hall, a quiet rupture spreads. A delegate from Tanzania rises unexpectedly. "I yield my time to the captain," she says. Then sits. Another, from Sierra Leone nods. Seconded. The moderator hesitates. This wasn't in the script. Traoré doesn't take the time. He steps down. As he walks past the rows of suited men, Diouf stares down at his folded hands. In them, the invitation card to an energy summit in Brussels next month. His thumb rubs the embossed logo, then stops. Outside, as Traoré exits into the blinding afternoon sun, a small girl in uniform breaks the security line and runs to him. She doesn't ask for an autograph. She hands him a folded piece of paper. Traoré reads it. 4 words, written in shaky French. "Please don't stop speaking." He folds it carefully, places it inside his jacket, and walks away. Behind him, inside that air-conditioned monument of diplomacy, the sound of whispered reconsiderations begins. Something has changed, and not just in policy, in posture, in memory, in mirrors. No headlines scream, no statues fall. But across cities and remote villages, there's a shift, not loud, but rooted. In Johannesburg, a radio host changes his intro music from American rap to Mbira rhythms. In Dakar, a university prints its first economics textbook, fully in Wolof, in Yaoundé. A minister is met with silence when he tries to joke about those barefoot revolutionaries. The silence holds a new kind of authority. The name is still spoken in some circles, but now with an asterisk, a cautionary tale of what happens when memory becomes commodity. In his gated compound, he sits alone at breakfast, watching Traoré's summit speech play again on an archive channel. The brightness of the screen reflects in his glasses, but his eyes don't move. Not once. In Ouagadougou, the rhythm of life remains humble. Traoré walks without guards, sometimes mistaken for a farmer. He sits in village council meetings, listening more than speaking. His face on billboards is always unauthorized, painted by children, carved into school walls, scribbled onto street corners. He never signs them. He doesn't have to. In marketplaces, elders bless him under their breath, not for being a hero, but for staying clean in a place built to stain. At a former colonial prison turned museum in Lome, an old woman wipes dust from a photo of Thomas Sankara, then pins a clipping of Traoré beside it. 2 generations. 1 thread. A tour guide notices, smiles, and leaves it there. Western media attempts a new cycle. Phrases like controversial populist and military opportunist creep into op-eds, but they no longer land. Their readers have stopped believing adjectives. They want evidence. And the evidence, grainy phone clips, community wells, textbooks, and local dialects, speaks for itself. An editorial in The Guardian calls him the man who didn't ask for power but gave it away. They don't realize it's not praise. It's pattern. In a quiet home in Tunisia, a mother watches her daughter write in Tifana for the first time, the ancient script of the Amazigh people. She doesn't ask why, she knows. Later that evening they watch the summit speech again. When Traoré says, "You are not powerless, you are unfinished," the daughter whispers it under her breath, like a prayer she forgot she knew. Even in Paris, where once Africa was debated like data, now cafes fill with nervous conversations. A diplomat mutters to a colleague, "The captain has made dignity contagious." The colleague replies, "Contagion is what happens when you pretend silence is strategy." Back in Burkina Faso, Traoré visits the burnt library again. This time it's rebuilt, not grand, just whole. Children sit on mats, reading books in 5 languages, one of which is their own. He watches them, says nothing. A teacher approaches quietly, says, "They don't know you're here." Traoré responds, "That's good. Let them know the words, not the man." On his way out, he passes a mural not of himself, but of a grandmother raising her hand to the sky. Above it, painted in charcoal, it reads, "Freedom is not a gift. It is a memory recovered." The trail outside the village bends into forest. He walks alone. The crunch of leaves, the calls of birds, the only applause he accepts. A boy catches up, panting, holding a folded envelope. Traoré takes it gently, opens, reads, "Your speech made me write in my own language again." He pauses, as if the earth beneath him deserves to hear it too. He folds the letter. No smile, just silence. A wind brushes through the trees, carrying with it the scent of dust and roots and something older, something still waking up. The final line, spoken not with grandeur, but with grounded truth. "We are not waiting for freedom. We are waking up to it." Fade to black. End.